I was not the first generation to be orphaned. My father was orphaned. My grandfather was orphaned. My mother passed away at 40. My grandmother passed away at 40. This was a cycle. And for all intents and purposes, it should have continued, but didn't. Is it because I'm somehow this extraordinary person gifted with a set of resilient capabilities that others don't have? Unequivocally not true. It's more because of these lighthouses that came to touch and impact my life, who in many ways had no idea the effect and the impact that they were having on me. They quite literally shined their light right at me. The first one that I remember so vividly was this woman who saw me reading on a rock wall one day across from this particularly brutal foster home, stopped to ask me what I was reading. And I just held up the same book that I had been reading over and over again. Well, later on that night, she appears at the front door of this foster home with a box of books in her arms, hands them to me, and says, "This is for the boy who likes to read." I met her again some 40 years after she dropped off that first set of books. And I asked this human lighthouse, Claire Levin is her name, and I asked her something that I always wanted to ask her. Why'd you do that? Because you could have kept walking, any of us, at any point. We can keep walking too. But this kind and humble woman did not. And when I asked her why, she said, well, I was doing something my mother told me to do. Give from where you are with whatever you have. She had no way of knowing the kind of impact and effect that it was having on me, that it literally became a lighthouse until I had the opportunity to sit down with her and let her know. Another lighthouse, another kind and gracious and wonderful woman whose name is Ruby Doughton. Ruby was a member of the New Bedford School Committee, and her name to this day is synonymous with integrity and values and faith, and in particular, a love of children. I first saw Ruby when she was judging a spelling bee contest that I was in, and it was the way she looked at me with a smile much like you see here. You know, you never forget who sees you first, who sees in you not circumstances, but possibilities. I remember something Ruby said one time, because she said, that young man is going to change the world. Now, the truth is, Ruby thought that of every young person she ever met. She interacted with you that way. She had that degree of expectation for you. And you, in turn, never, ever really wanted to disappoint her. My third lighthouse was this man who worked for Ruby, ironically. Finally managed to escape this foster home. I'm seated across from my social worker, Mike Sylvia, as kind and gracious, as wonderful a human being as I've ever met. It's 3 days after Christmas. I've arrived in his office in the late morning, and he and I are there for the rest of the day, and I am watching him call families, trying to get somebody to take me in. And at one point, out of pure desperation, he says to me, do you know anybody that you can stay with? And initially, I said no. Nobody came to mind. I had been this kind of anchorless, rudderless boy. But then I remembered John Sykes, who I overheard talking to another counselor. I was making a plea to stay in the program when this foster family was trying to remove me, and apparently I was persuasive enough. But as I walked out of the office and walked away, I overheard John say to the other counselor, you know, I don't have any children, but if I did, I would love for them to be a lot like him. John did not know I heard him say that, but a couple of years later, when Mike Sylvia, my social worker, asked me if I know anybody, this is the only person I could think of. And I said to Mike, I said, there's a counselor in the Upward Bound program, and I think he likes me. Mike calls intending to leave a message because it's school vacation, and John is not in his office, but he was in his office, actually doing paperwork. And to this day, he'll tell you he was meant to be there at that moment and at that time. You know, some years ago, this is John and I on a stage together talking about the film. And somebody asked John in the audience, why'd you do that? And He said to me the most instructive thing, he said to everyone the most instructive thing. He said, all of us at some point have this opportunity to simply say yes. And when I got that call, I knew that this was my opportunity to say yes. That's something we can all do. We can all simply say yes. These three different individuals, three different people, all lighthouses though. And to me, they have all the attributes of a lighthouse. They're humble. They seek no reward. They need no recognition. And they appear at the most important of times. To this day, the three of them have not fully understood just how impactful it was, how much of a lifeline they were. They never judged the situation or the storm that I found myself in. They didn't care if I was black or white, gay or straight, Republican or Democrat. They saw me in a storm that was not of my doing and simply asked, how can I help you get to safety? And that has become something of a life mantra for me. What a powerful impact that gratitude can have on a life. You have people like that in your life too. If I asked you to define and tell me about your human lighthouses, you don't have to think about it long. And not for any people in your family, but outside your family. You remember the teacher. You remember the coach. You remember a mentor. You remember a first boss. You remember somebody who either interacted, engaged, or did something with you that changed the way that you saw everything. And so much of where your life is today, you can rightly point to them and say that they actually had an important part of your own journey. These are my lighthouses. Who are yours?